The story of the prodigal son, and I think it could also very easily be daughter, is an interesting story that Jesus tells. It calls on us to connect. It comes home because it's really about us. You know, when you hear this story, it's one of those stories when you say, well, it's not about me, and you start pointing your fingers, and you're going to identify, you're going to fix it on somebody else's blame. You want to accuse somebody else. But if you stop to think about it, who among us has used the words, I want that? I want it. You know, in our culture, we're taught some impatience. In our culture, we don't want to wait for something. We want it right now. The prodigal son, the prodigal daughter, is someone who's been influenced by advertising. Ever been influenced by advertising? This prodigal son, this prodigal daughter has been persuaded by all the commercials. Ever had that happen to you? As soon as we begin nodding our heads to things like that, it's a reality that we too are a part of this. Last week we talked about the word affluenza. In this culture, we are addicted to shopping. We're told that buying and going shopping is recreational, and so we consume. We consume. We talked about the American dream and how that American dream has morphed into pursuing more things and buying more things and juggling more things and getting more things. You hear the word more? There's a lot here. There's a multitude of themes in this story. Today, our theme is about wisdom and finance. That word prodigal. Prodigal is not a definition of someone who gets lost. The word prodigal literally means one who wastes his money. The prodigal is an individual who's not worried about tomorrow, who wants it today and will do what he needs to do to get it today. You're the impatient. The prodigal has a name. He's a human being, just like every one of us, a real person. There's an identity to this one. It's someone who struggles with a habit, a bad habit with money. And here's the danger. Do you know that famine occurs for all of us? It eventually comes for all of us. It's a money famine. It's a problem. When everything is spent, when all the cash is gone and the paycheck has been doled out, what's left? You know this temptation is to reach into your pocket and come out with that plastic card, isn't it? That little plastic card that allows us to buy it now, to charge it, to put it on credit, to go into debt. The temptation is that it feels so good to buy it right now, and you don't have to worry about it for, 30 days? But then comes the reckoning. At first, maybe you're able to pay off those credit card debts. But that seduction of that affluenza stuff, it's there. It continues to draw and to suck and to feed on us. And finally, we get to this place where there's nothing left. And our credit cards are maxed out, and nada is left in terms of paying them. That's the famine. That's the tough place. And people are asked to figure it out. How do you get by? It's easy to say, well, that's not me. Here's the irony. The more financially secure we are, the less we tend to worry about what we buy or don't buy. And so we start buying here and we start buying there, and oh gosh, that looks good. We just go on and on. We begin to waste our money. Remember the word prodigal? It's one who wastes their money. We begin to waste our money on this and on that, and you know how money can just kind of flow through your fingers? Psh, where'd that go? We start doing what everybody else does. We're not as careful as we could be or we should be. And abruptly, finances become a struggle. Instead of there being joy with finances, it's gone, and we start worrying and fearing about what comes next. To think carefully how we spend money, how we pursue our money, takes some strategy. One of the first strategies is to avoid impulse buying. You probably know this. You never go to the grocery store when you're hungry. You know why? You're going to buy all kinds of things you hadn't planned to. Impulse buying is also helped by shopping for only what you need, making a list and then sticking to it, or waiting 24 hours before you go out and actually buy it to find out if your emotions are still involved. thinking about what you do takes emotions out of the situation. Example is eating out. It's not bad to eat out. The frequency is the issue, though. Do you know that the average American eats out 4 times a week? If we were to eat less often, go out less often, wouldn't that be hanging on to our money? And maybe that money can be spent on something important. Maybe that can be spent on being generous or helping someone and giving that money to someone in need. That brings me to a thought. What is the purpose of life? That's an important part of talking about money, because money begs the question, what is the purpose of our lives? Is it to consume? Is it to possess? Is it to have? Is it to accumulate? Is it to have as much fun as we possibly can? Is it to buy as much enjoyment as we possibly can? Is it to be able to have pleasures one right after another? Is that what life is about? If it is, then we need to go back to this story that Jesus told about the prodigal. Society has a simple phrase for us. It simply says, go do it. Just do it. Don't ask questions, just do it. Don't think about it. And yet the Bible has a different purpose. It says we are made for a higher purpose. We are made for a reason. And we're here to care for God's creation. We're here to love our God and our neighbors. We're here to take care of our families and those who are in need. We're here to glorify God. Seek justice, do mercy. Do you hear the active verbs here? To do, to act, to move, to do things. Our resources are given to us as a blessing for a purpose. It's to care for our families, certainly, but it's also to help others. It's to serve God, and it's to look for opportunities where God might be leading us. Life purpose is about God's purpose. It's something that's much greater than our own selves. It's about committing ourselves to what God has in plan, has in mind for us. That doesn't just happen. To pursue a higher purpose requires some planning. It requires us to stop and to think, to pause and to reflect, to look in the mirror and ask, what is it that God sees? What is it that God wants of me? Can we go to the next slide? In your bulletin is this sheet. You want to pull that out? It's an ivory-colored sheet. And on one side it says My Life and Financial Goals Worksheet. The purpose of a sheet like this is to encourage you to stop and to think. And so I invite you to take this home this week and stop and to think about what your life purpose is, what your goals are, what the realities are for the mid and the long-term goals. How would you define or describe your life purpose it starts with? What are some goals that you would like to achieve with this life purpose? And what are some financial goals that can support your life goals and purposes? Do you know that how we spend our money speaks incredibly loudly about who we are and what's important to us? One of the goals in this, as you read through it, is that one piece in each of the levels on each of the pages, each of the lines, is that there's something that connects with your faith and what you say we believe. Remember, we just did this, I believe in God the Father, and we just did this piece for baptism. We say we believe all of this. We say that's most important. But how do we live it? To have a purpose and identity is what this sheet is about. It's asking you to reflect on that and say, this is important to me. And it's not just how I live it, but it's how I spend my money and how I am involved with my cash. So, the first step is to set financial goals. The second is to plan towards that goal. Best way to do that is with a budget. A budget is simply a spending plan. It allows us to set our goals and gives us an opportunity to find out the variety of approaches we're going to be doing to get to that budget. Some people use an envelope system where they have an envelope for this, for this, for this, for this. Other people go to an accountant or a financial advisor. And for people who are in financial crisis, they sometimes need to find a financial counselor. And that counselor will help them to arrange their finances and to develop a plan and to set specific goals. Doesn't sound a lot healthier to be involved in that way earlier than crisis time? Whatever process you use, it's important to simply have a plan. Can we go to the next slide? So in your bulletin, and on the back of the order of worship, there is this page that says 6 planning practices. You want to go to that? I got you running all over the bulletin today, don't I? Yeah. So pick up your bulletin, go to the end of the bulletin, and there's the 6 planning practices. A practice to keep in mind is that we put God first in our living and our giving. That's what we say we believe. To put God first in our living and our giving is to give your tithe and offering on top of your paycheck and then to live on what's left. Secondly, it's to prepare a spending plan, to track all of expenses monthly. Creating a budget means developing a plan in which you tell your money, hear this? You tell your money, instead of your money telling you, you tell your money what you want to do with it. Tracking your expenses is like getting on the scales to see how you're doing. I don't like getting on the scale, but it's important to know where you're at. And so the same is with money. Getting on the scale and checking it out and finding out. Simplify your lifestyle, living below your means. This discipline is critical to the success of any financial plan. Next Sunday, we're going to actually devote some time to that. Then providing immediately for an emergency fund. You ever had a crisis in your life? You ever hit a rough spot? Having an emergency fund is important for times like this to get through it. So that's important, to set aside a separate account for saving for emergencies. But also along with that comes off paying the credit card debt, using cash or debit cards and not credit cards. Then paying off credit card debt using cash or debit cards, not credit cards. And then practicing long-range saving and investing habits. Saving money is the number one wise money management principle that everyone should practice. And there are 3 types of savings to have: the emergency fund, the savings for our wants and goals, and then some kind of a retirement savings. 6 practices that are useful for helping us manage money. The point is that we live with wisdom and with our faith. Next slide. Last week, I invited you to pray with me as we ended the sermon. And what I asked you to do is to take your hands and put them in front of you, hands up, palms up, as a way of saying, Lord, be with me. Lord, be here. And I invite you to do that again. Hands up, facing forward, and then pray. Let's do this together. God, you know all about us, even when we don't. We don't know where every dime went. But somehow you know what we did with all that we had. Last month, last year, and every year. You do not forbid us from having joy in our possessions. In fact, you delight in our having joy. But what you know is that simply acquiring more stuff isn't where we find joy. Lord, forgive us for being wasteful, for being prodigal. Forgive us for leveraging our future in order to have pleasures in the present. And help us to be good managers of the treasures you have given us. Help us to be generous and willing to share, kingdom-minded and focused on accomplishing your purposes for our lives. In Jesus' name.